So we should be good. I'm just going to send the message in media. I'm also going to ping dev ping squad. All right. So is this today? It is today. Today is today. For anybody watching, if you're watching the recording or live, we decided to give a code review stream a try. And so the idea behind this is we just had our weekly meeting and we're like, okay, well, we're going to go take a look at some code and we're going to talk through it because we want to try and get this merged. But it would be also pretty cool to do this code review process recorded. And so people can check it out. So XMAC is the one leading this. I'm kind of just like watching along where we'll talk through it a little bit. I think we might have some other devs in chat. So if any of the other devs see anything, then we can hopefully include that as well. And then we want to get this merged sooner than later because it should allow us to do some pretty nice things with Airshipper. So XMAC, I'll hand it over to you and we can walk through this.
Okay, hello. So this is like a big MR merge request that will include different features for Airshipper, mainly all for the server side of Airshipper. So there needs to be some client adjustments, but this is the first step also to test those client adjustments. It will allow us to use multiple channels per Airshipper server. It will allow us to have a cleaner separation for different architectures, so ARM architecture, for example, and not only x64. And it has some cleanups generally all over the place. The first thing what this pull request is changing is quite dramatically, so to say. Till now, we only configured Airshipper server with environment variables, like you see on the left side. We used to have a variable for different tokens for GitHub uploading, but also used to have variables for the secret that we have to verify GitLab's webhook. For filters, we have different filters on the stage and the executable, and for a mapping. And all these environment variables now go into one big file. And why do we use a big configuration file now instead of variables? Because for channels we need to have multiples, and we need to have an array of those configurations, and put all those arrays into different variables. Environment variables would be hell of confusing, so we just went for the easy solution, one configuration file, and we can configure everything there.
Is there an example of this config file in the MR at all?
The MR does not have an example. I can try to create one, but I need to be careful to not have any sensible data in it, because it contains some tokens. But if you start Airshipper and the file exists but is not, but the values are not valid, it will create a template file. It will create like a default file and save it to a template location, and then you can adjust it and modify it to your needs.
Okay, so it would require like a first run to do that sort of.
Right, if you don't have that file already, right? Then it saves it to the disk, and you can modify it and copy it. So here we have the structure of the new configuration file, and everything starts with the config, which contains now out of for multiple channels the data path on the file structure, and the GitLab token to be able to query GitLab for variables, which is also part of this MR, which needs to be set on this configuration file so we can apply this for all channels.
And the use case of this Airshipper server, this is like something that like we host, but would it make sense for someone else to host it as well and like set up their own GitLab token, or is it mostly just us?
It's mostly just us. Mostly just us, and for testing purposes. So we want to have one production, but we also want to have a staging and a testing one to figure out something, or maybe to help people in different locations. That could be also a good point. But usually there is no need for others to host Airship for Veloren. Though they could adjust Airshipper to adapt to their own game if they want to. So let's say they have
Oh,
their
yeah.
own game and need a game launcher, they could just adjust Airshipper and use it for that.
So in the future, might we look at making Airshipper more generic, and so that it can be used for, like, it's not as attached to Veloren stuff, and so either maybe someone, if they're shipping like a modded version of Veloren or like something else, they would be able to do that. Or yeah, okay, interesting.
That should be a valid point for Airshipper. Though for now, this still concentrates on the Veloren use case, but I mean, we try to make the configuration as a bit more generic, at least here, not as generic as possible.
So right here we have like a filter enum. So we have stage, target branch, build name, and variable. And so what do these represent?
Okay, I will go through the whole structure from top to bottom, because I think that's the easiest way to explain it. Right? In our configuration, we have like multiple channels, and currently what we are using is one channel, and this is the nightly channel, and we only use nightly. And for user that is opening Airshipper, he only has one option to download and just play. But in the future, we might want to have different channels. We want to have like nightly. We want to have the last is stable. We want to have a weekly channel. Maybe some special build from another in develop branch or whatever. And this is what channels are for. And each channel has a different name. Each channel has a GitLab secret. Has a secret that it uses to verify its webhook from GitLab. So this is a technical secret. It needs some shared string work, as long as GitLab has the same configured. Each channel can upload to a different GitHub project or GitHub tag, so to say. Each channel has a set of filters to determine from a webhook that this channel is meant. Maybe we can have a look at some. No, we cannot have a look at some. Is this recorded? Then we already showed the first secret that we are not allowed to show. And we need to do that afterwards, because otherwise people can actually push to our Airshipper server.
Yes.
Like this is one of those requests. And it contains like a lot of information. And most of this information is actually not sensible data at all. What do we have here? And we have here like different builds. And for each build we have like the name. Like this is an Airshipper build. It contains macOS for x64, right? And it contains an artifact file, and what Airshipper server is doing, it will grab, macOS. Grab this artifact file and just download it via this ID. And now when we switch back here, no, this is the wrong. We have like different filters for channel to see if this if Airshipper should accept a webhook or if it shouldn't accept a webhook. Right? It can, for example, look and only accept webhooks that goes to master. This is in fact one of those filters. We have like before we had a hard-coded, maybe show the before situation. Before we had a hard-coded value which was Airshipper artifact target branch, right? Which was master. But now, as we have multiple channels, we have like this filter, and this filter is on the target branch, and then we can configure anything in here. And actually, this string is a regex.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention in chat, Zester pointed out it'd be really cool for the channels to have historic builds as well, so that we could go back and play like 0.3 or something like that. Because I mean, I look at pictures from the old blogs from time to time when I need to go back, and holy smokes, it's crazy how some of the stuff is so different.
That would be possible. We probably need to manually hack them in a bit with modifying the database.
Yeah.
Right, because usually we configure Airshipper via new requests, and we don't have new webhooks for them. But,
and it would probably only compile on like Linux and Windows very easily. We'd have to go back and add some stuff to the previous versions, I suppose.
Yeah. But it should be possible. So like, right, we have this target filter which we can apply, and for example, only apply master builds for one. We could have a custom branch here. Another filter possible is the stage filter, which will look at the respective stage, right? For example, we have build nightly and we also have build, and we can use this, for example, to filter out like what do we have, like benchmarking stages or something like this, like published stage. We don't want to have those. Where are we? Here. We have a build name. This is a filter based on this name here, right? Airshipper Windows. And we have like a variable filter, which will actually filter on the variables of our schedules. So what will be possible is to have a schedule here, and we can edit it, and it has a bunch of variables, and I can reveal it because this is actually not very secret, it's just a value too. And we can look up which schedule triggered our one, and then look, is this a nightly value, or is this a weekly release, or is this a special new release build like 0.12 or 0.13, and can then do different stuff in Airshipper with it. So this is what those filters are for. And then we have a simple AND filter, which is just a list of filters, which makes sure that all of those filters will pass. And yep. And basically we have two kinds of filters in per channel. We have the first filter that will check to apply if a channel is applied. And the first channel that matches with this filter will be applied to a specific webhook request. And then we have a map to map different builds to different architectures, to different platforms. This is like a platform mapper, which will have like also a filter and a platform is an operating system and an architecture. And we will use the later map to map how to detect the Windows version and the macOS version, because until now this was hard-coded. Now we can have like a filter. If you see the word Windows, then map the OS Windows to it. If you see the x64, then you add the architecture to it. Maybe let's try to get some live coding example here. There's nano configuration. I'm just preparing something on my other screen that is not shared. So and that, right? Here we now have something which is a valid configuration. Right, we have one channel, and this channel is the nightly channel. It has like a GitLab secret. It will upload to GitHub, and then it will check on all stages that are from build and master. And then for each Linux 684 build, it will apply Linux operating system and architecture x64. For ARM, it will do this. For macOS, still macOS and Windows. This talk is also blurred out. So this will be like the final configuration in that case. Right. We have a default configuration, and we have just coding to load it and to save it again. These are those 100 lines of code. Any questions regarding the configuration file?
One thing in chat. Do you need separate binaries, platform dependent, and assets common across targets?
Do we need separate binaries? For now, We just have assets in each binary included.
So ideally what we would want to do is ship a binary for each, so you download that, and then you have an asset pack for each, so you download that, I presume.
Yep. Because for now, if you test it, you will download a gigabyte of data from from GitLab every time. But this is yet another step, and it makes stuff even more complicated. And also, this needs to be integrated in like historic Veloren releases too, right? Because we need to do all of the separation for the past two, if you want it. It's not done in this merge request. But if someone is interested in coding this, of course, I will review it. Cool. Then once we have loaded this configuration file, the first thing we are doing is we are compiling these regexes. And I was a bit lazy, and I wanted to keep it rather simple than doing it overcomplicated. So all this structure is basically copied, but now with regexes here in this filter, in a separate file. One could use generics and then pass the generics through the whole structure, but I didn't know if this was the right approach for the complexity. So if we look now here we have like the config again, one-to-one copied. We have filters now regexes because this allows us to not hard code, not compile our strings to regexes every time we apply them, and to have the heavy computation at the start of the program once only. And
I'm just curious. One thing I was thinking of with like the regex is oftentimes you might be able to accomplish the same thing with different regex, or concoct some string that matches against regexes that maybe it shouldn't. And so is there a potential in here for either creating a regex that could be vulnerable or having a regex be used badly?
That's a good question. The regexes are all provided by the Airshipper owner, though. So if he needs to do anything bad, they will probably need to be
what I mean
towards themselves.
Yeah, true. I'm thinking along the lines of and I think I'll keep considering this as we go along, but more like, let's say we host our Airshipper server and it has a certain regex put in, but then someone was able to make a branch or something that managed to fit itself inside a regex that it shouldn't be, so that like let's say for example someone's arbitrary branch was considered like the same as master or something like that, or that would be like the case that like the worst case for this type of thing, I would imagine. But as we go along, I'll keep considering it, and then we can see if that might need to be looked into.
Yeah, that might be actually a problem. Of course, but I mean, this is like a problem that the owner of regex and the one who coded that regex needs to think about, right?
Yeah.
Most likely, as there are also other filters on things like the stage and the build names, where the user normally don't have access to code, so it will be really hard to do this. And still, he needs to hijack. And most regexes are also, for example, in our example coding here, they are simply plain just a value.
Exactly.
Master.
Yeah.
Don't know if there's any potential to make something act as match something which is not exactly master. If there's, of course, then we might want to mitigate.
Oh, you're not coming through quite clearly. It sounds like you're a bit further away from your mic.
I don't know.
Still about the same, I think.
Damn it. What there is what I can do.
Curious. I'm unsure.
Maybe the network is.
Yeah, it could be network. It sounds like it's I don't know, like capping, or like it's like muffled sort of.
Give me a second.
All good, no worries. As XMAC is going through some of this stuff, I'm just writing up an issue for a separate thing to auto close issues and pull requests on GitHub. So someone just created some pull requests on GitHub, and so I recommended they come and create the merge requests on GitLab instead. But it'd be helpful if we had a GitHub action that would do it for us. So I'm just making an issue on GitLab right now to have that happen.
Is it better now?
I think so.
Perfect.
Well, keep talking a little bit. I'll tell you if it's not.
Yeah. Okay, so basically what we just do is we compile those widgets once at the beginning of the program, and other than that there's nothing fancy in here. Right, just regex compilation going on. Then we have some code to apply those regexes and to see if they match. Right, for a stage with regex we check if from the pipeline the build name, we get the build UID, and then matches stage, right? So the information we have for those apply filters is always the whole webhook, and then the number which of one of those builds. And then the regex will search for the correct build, look for stage, and apply it. The target branch is the same for all builds, so we don't need to get the build here. The build name is of course not same for all the builds, and for variables we need to match all variables and find the first one which is matching the key, and then check if the value is also matching, and otherwise return false. An end filter will just go through the whole list of its filters, and right, implementation channels, compile. Alright, this just moves the loading structure into the working structure, so to say. And also we have like a hash map here instead of a vec at some point, because for working with it, it's a bit better. And then we have some test code that creates like a valid pipeline webhook here, and then we just create a pipeline and assert that those widgets work. Here we could also, for example, test to hijack them, so we don't need to create real webhooks. We can all test this all in code. So this is, so to say, the biggest change in the whole pull request. It's this configuration change. And now I think we can just go.
Tests, yeah.
Yeah, this is.
Do we have? Oh, we do have pipelines running on Airshipper, right? Like the tests.
We have pipelines, but this is the first test actually we have in Airshipper.
Okay.
So. I renamed this function from does not exist to just exists and test for the opposite. Especially that most places where it was used, it was negated anyways. So yeah, and the only place it was used, it was negated, and then the negated function that checks for does not exist was a bit too complicated. I just renamed it to exist. Okay, going further down, right, and of course false, true is becoming false, and vice versa. So this code here is actually quite interesting. If I think what it is, this is like a protection thing on our web server. The GitLab side is sending a token via this header, via this xGitLab token header, and we are rejecting every request to our server which does not contain the correct token. And then we don't even accept all the payload.
With the server here, what's it being hosted with? Is it just a simple? Oh, it's Rocket. Okay.
Yeah, And for now, right, the code was quite easy. We accept this header to be present. We accept this header to match our config header, and then we just succeeded. Now it's a bit less strict. We still accept it to be present, and then we go for all our channels, and we just check if any of our channels matches it. So we can have multiple channels. They can also have multiple secret tokens. You could define them with multiple webhooks if you want to. And we just matches them. Right.
Just out of curiosity, I'm kind of thinking about like that little block of code that you just showed off. And so I think that can be expressed pretty easily as an iterator type of thing. But when you're going through something like this, why would you choose to use like a for loop instead of an iterator for this?
Because I haven't thought about iterator at this point. Yeah, this can probably be used with an iterator and any.
Okay.
Actually,
no
with
worries. No
iter
worries.
any. Right. Let me just add this as a code. Iter is probably the right thing to do here.
Sounds good. Yeah, I was just curious on if there was a way to, or rather, if it might be like more readable like this. But I'm a big fan of just using iterators everywhere, and so.
Yeah,
good.
I'm. My brain is not that functional all the time. So
No worries.
when I write code, I mostly first start off with the basic, doing loop by loop, and then I have a look at it and think, wait, you can.
Yeah.
Can
Okay.
write
Interesting.
it in a simpler way. For example,
so for myself,
for iterators.
Oh, you go.
Yeah. Sorry. I used to write this whole compile thingy here also with iterators. Instead of pushing to vectors. But then I had this problem of early returning with this question mark operator. And then when thinking, I could have like 3 extra layers of complicated stuff, but then I said like, for this code, I just keep it plain stupid. And,
okay, I see.
Because otherwise I would have like to create an extra box around it, have some pseudo return code, have to match on this and that, and then break. And then I was thinking like, well, this is way too complicated what I'm doing. I'm just transferring one.
So for myself, the biggest place that I've used Rust is a lot of like coding questions in like advent of code. And so for myself, whenever I approach like an advent of code question, I'm always thinking first, like I have data that is going to come in and I'm going to need to change it to one answer coming out. And then oftentimes it allows me to think in terms of like, okay, well, what am I doing? What am I applying to this data to make it do something? But then once we start thinking in terms of a lot more types and a lot more abstractions on the data, not just numbers like I do all the time, then I definitely find it like a little bit different to consider, okay, well, what's happening separately. And so, and interestingly enough, like I learned all of the functional stuff I know from Rust, and I'm taking a functional course at my university right now. And I have like a Haskell assignment due tonight, but Haskell's a decent amount harder to learn than I thought it would be. And so I'm definitely appreciating a lot of the stuff that I've sort of had the input from Rust to do.
Yeah, I can only agree. Also, I didn't do much functional programming before. I'm very happy that I didn't have to work with Haskell because I've heard like very complicated to achieve. I mean, it's super easy to achieve functional problems in, but I also heard that for everything else it should be very complicated.
Well, I think the one thing that I'm finding a lot is like I really enjoy learning about a lot of type stuff. And so I've really been interested. I was so at my like sibling university in Ottawa, University of Ottawa. We've been doing like a weekly reading club in which we're going through the Rust book. And the guy over there who's running it, when we started going through enums and structs, or I guess just enums and pattern matching, he taught it from the perspective of algebraic data types. And to me, I'm like, this is like such a beautiful idea of looking at types from the perspective of like very high level ideas of like combining and adding and all of this. And so I'm really interested in learning Haskell from the perspective of what are these ideas that I don't consider in other languages. But then I'm also on the same page that like, I don't see it to be as productive for the stuff that I do compared to Rust. There's someone in chat. I also have a Haskell assignment due tonight. Nice.
Oh, you have an assignment to it. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. That will be fun.
Yeah.
Assignments, timely assignments are always. Okay. Now we come to the kind of complicated webhook handling code. And first we are going in this artifact function. So the artifact is actually the structure that we are storing in our database. Maybe I just open another tab, and then we can have a look at how our artifact is represented in our database. DB schema, is it the artifact here? Oh, this is our artifact. Our artifact has an ID, a build ID, it has a date, a hash, an author merged by a platform, which is for now either Linux or, for example, macOS Arch64. It has already a channel which is just nightly in all our cases for now, but we can use this for this channel, this feature. It has a file name, and it has the download URL. And we're making use of both. For example, file name we can use for local storage, right? And the download URL we can also use, for example, if we want to serve it via GitHub. Then we connect the store. And this is what the artifact is. And what we're doing here is we have this function that is creating an artifact from our webhook data. And we extended the parameters from not only passing the webhook data in, but also pass the channel to work on in, and to pass.
We might have lost XMac there. Oh, you're back. We lost about 5 seconds of you.
Okay. So I just went over the header here. So before we just put in the pipeline data, this was everything we have from the pipeline. We're now also adding the channel and the build the platform that are pre-calculated and passed to this function. And the first thing this code was doing, it was doing a check if some filter is matching, and as filters are now totally calculated at a unique place, we are no longer need to have this check here, right? We can just put it in the function that is calling it. We replaced some code that needed to turn a time UTC into native date time with chrono into a much more elegant solution, rather than putting it into a string and converting it back. The problem is that the database cannot store datetime UTC, it can only store native datetime. This is a database problem, so we need to convert it here. Before we had like a get platform function that just took the build name and had hard-coded in if the build name is Windows, the platform is Windows. If the build name contains Linux Arch64, then it is Linux Arch64. And all of this conversion is now done via our configuration here, and in a configurable, elegant way. So we
in the previous one we had Arch64 for Linux, but we're also adding for Mac as well now, right? So ARM for Linux and Mac.
Yeah, let me try to find.
I think in the config file you had.
Yeah, we are on the way to configuration. Yeah, we're having Mac OS builds, but we didn't have Mac OS hard-coded into Airshipper, so we couldn't serve Mac OS 64.
Yeah, okay. So now this is part of the config file. I see.
Now it's part of the config and no longer needs to be hard-coded, which also allows us in the future to ship other architectures. And the channel was all taken from the build. No, it was just globally assigned to nightly always. And now it's just a parameter. And right, as some functions are not fully fully making use of the platform, for example, the backend still stores platform as a single string, we will just concatenate OS and architecture here too, And the whole transformation on the storage end will also probably take place in another merge request. Because I didn't want to adjust storage here, and just wanted to just don't touch the persistence layer. I also changed the date format to something which looks a bit more like the ISO standard, that we are using a T as a separator and columns as a separator, rather than an additional dash and an underscore.
Is that a file name?
That is
it
then
okay
a file
to?
name.
Is it okay to have a colon in a file name?
Yeah. It's in file name. File name. It should not be a problem to have a colon in a file name. Or is it a problem in Windows?
Well, whenever there's a non-ASCII character, or not non-ASCII, but non-like letter or like underscore or dash, it kind of worries me a bit. But if this is,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's a problem. Oh yeah, colons are prohibited in the Windows world. They conflict with
this is Counter-Strike.
Counter-Strike moment.
Yeah. Remove colon if it's not Windows permitted. But good find, actually good find.
Code review. Yeah.
Right. Just some. Right, we have to clone the name here. Some renaming. This we're just returning an URL now from the URL crate, and so we unwrap it. But there's basically no way that this is a problem, except because all those parameters are configuration parameters. Right? Either it works because of your configuration, or it does not work because of your configuration. And if you misconfigure it,
come from?
The build. Oh wait, is the build ID? Where is it coming from? Is it a configuration? No, it's not a configuration. Haha. The build ID is coming from the build, and but the build is it's an integer. I will just verify that it's an integer.
Because
channel build.
Yeah, so that would only be a problem, or rather, because it would get the right project, but if we say go check out some arbitrary build ID instead of the right one.
Yeah, the unwrap is only a problem if
I'll clone it and just I'll follow it back, so you can keep going. I'll mention if I find anything.
If this is not a valid what to say. The unwrap is only a problem if just that it's not a valid URL. So if this build ID would contain some invalid characters, for example a slash or so.
Well, yeah.
Or some I don't know what. But build ID is an uint. And I think all characters from 0 to 9 are valid. At least I hope so. Use them here. So this will not catch anything. Right, and this is the remove code here. So this was the handling of the creation of our artifacts. And now we have pipeline handling. And before our code was like, we try to get like from one pipeline, from one webhook. Pipeline is this webhook file. We try to generate multiple artifacts. And the artifacts we just had above, right? And before we did some various filters here, which were kind of hard-coded. The branch filter, we checked only for success. And we also were skipping some artifacts here. And then we applied the function from above. And now all those filters are done in separate. Not all of those filters, but we have created separate functions. The first function is the success function, which is just separated for performance reasons. Because this is executed later before we get the variables, which are unfortunately only possible to get via a REST API call. And those take some time. This is because GitLab has a weird pattern for variables in pipelines. but this is some like problem on its own. We have a function that is getting the channel of a current pipeline update. So right, we have this webhook here, and to try which channel we are having, we iterate through this. We iterate through our configs of channels, and we iterate through all the filters, and we are applying a filter. And if a filter works, then we log it and we turn, hey, we have a filter. And if not, then we turn, no, we don't have a channel for this webhook. And everything was done beforehand, this artifacts file now moved into this artifact file, which is getting the channel name now, and now it's getting the configuration from a channel which always exists because it was matched before there. And then we apply the filters too. Right, we iterate over our list of filters and apply each filter, and if this filter works, then we platform filter, we probably use this for tracing, right? Oh, we don't even use that for tracing. Then we try to create an artifact from it, like we did before. When we were successful, right? We also try to create an artifact from it. This whole code is probably something for the end, because this is complicated as heck. And now we go through the roots that changed. So in Rocket, you always have this cool fancy annotation that says like, this is my route for the webhook for channels. Then we give in some arbitrary OS, that's a variable, and an architecture, and then you can have variables that correspond to those, and you can work with them quite easily. And Rocket is doing all the verification part, and verification, for example, if you request an integer here, that this is also always an integer.
And sorry, this is what a client would be requesting to the Airshipper server.
Right. The first thing that we have is now a new webhook that returns all channels which we support. Right, before we only had the nightly channel, and we are requesting the user to give in some channels here, but the user has no way of knowing which channels are supported. So the user can give us their current operating system and their architecture, and then we can say, hey, for your operating system, right, for macOS we have like current master and we have the weekly build, but we don't have the historic builds because in the past we didn't bother to build macOS, for example.
Is there a endpoint that would allow us to, you can query it and you can, like you say, slash channels, and it will get all the channels?
All the channels over all
everything that would be in the config.
No, there is no such endpoint yet.
I'm trying to think of what that might be helpful for. Yeah, well, let's say, for example, that it shouldn't be up to the client to know that there's a build that we've made for 0.3 and we've released. And so it should be up to the server to tell them, oh, we now have this build, I think. If you want to take a look at it. And so it should be like listing all channels, should it just give back every single OS architecture version name or whatever. And then the client can say, oh, okay, well, I'm on Mac OS, and so I only want to show the ones from this architecture. But now the client can, or the player can go through and select all of the or whichever one they want. That might not, that might be out of scope of this one. I don't think it's required right now, but I think it could be helpful down the line.
Yeah, it could be helpful. Like also websites are showing you downloads for packages that are not your current operating system, right? For example, if you go to like I don't know, Git, and then there is a download button. Download it for Linux, download it for macOS, and download it for Windows, regardless that they know that you are running Windows locally. They still show you the buttons because maybe you are downloading it for a friend or so and want to transfer it via a USB stick or something.
Exactly. I like that idea because it also means that like when a user comes in, it gives them the ability to like go, okay, let's go below the hood. Let's like I don't want to be restricted by what you think I need, but instead I want to see like everything I can do, for example. I think that'd be pretty cool. In that case, should we give them a list of all channels, or should we give them a list of all operatings and systems and architecture supported? And that user could have multiple queries. I think all channels, because it will be like 50 max or something like that. I mean, if it does scale to
Yeah,
a lot more or whatever, then we can start breaking it down. But it should
Okay.
be up to the client to decide.
Item
Yeah.
create endpoint for all channels. That returns all channels. All channels, and then also their operating system, and because we need the operating system and the architecture for the future calls, so to say. Because just
Yeah.
knowing a channel name does not help the user saying where it's supported. No.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Right. Then what we have so far is a version, right? The user, before we download a new version with Airshipper will query an endpoint and check if there's a new version available. And to do that, it will access version platform channels. Right? Channel for now is always nightly. Platform for now is something like Windows. And then it will look up in the database if it exists and return it. For our
A good question from chat.
Yep.
Sorry, from Isa, could this also potentially serve other Veloren front ends? I think down the line that makes a lot of sense. So, for example, we have Veloren right now, which is like the command line Veloren.
We could use Veloren. Yeah, why not?
I'd love to see a launcher that would allow you to play Veloren, play whatever version you want, play beta, whatever. But then also there's like this other, maybe it's like you can also download the Veloren editor, and inside there you can like set up worlds, you can like take screenshots, whatever. You can make assets, whatever. And then maybe there's another game that focuses more on the fact that like it's like some strategy game, and it's also in the launcher or something like that. And they're all open source and they're all GPL3 and everything like that. But it's just a very convenient way to access the ecosystem.
Yeah, that would require though some client changes also, because I think for now what we're doing is when we are switching version is we delete everything and then we download, and we probably want to have like multiple versions installed at the same time too, right? But theoretically we could achieve this also with multiple channels, right? Have like one for a completely different game.
Yeah.
Everything is prepared for that, at least from the server side. So what we are doing then is adding this new endpoint. Till the database transition is done, we are just concatenating it here again. In the future, probably all those old endpoints, like we have this to do for a year here, we want to change this behavior to remove those old endpoints then, once we have all people move to the new Airshipper version, which is not yet released, so we cannot do that this now. But we will do so. We skip those few lines above, and we go to the download URL. We have a few lines, but we don't look at the queen stuff. And we do the same thing for channel download, for the download actually, right? Before we checked if the hash changed, and when we actually want to download, we give in OS args. We get just the download URL and just proceed as usual. You already saw metrics. Then maybe just jump down to metrics for a short metrics break. Instead of having different hard-coded counters for Windows, Linux, macOS, and different architectures, we now have only one OS architecture
and in counter back. And so it's able to, why is it not like a hash map that does like, it just stores...
In the end it is exactly like a hash map. This is the Prometheus tool, and in the end, if you access it, you give in a combination of OS and architecture, and behind the scenes it probably is a hash map.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
But
we put it as an array. Yeah,
this is the answer. Vec probably because this is, I don't know vec. I think vector is its vector is Prometheus tech talk and not Rust. So
yeah,
that's
okay.
Maybe
Or
Right,
maybe
we just
because it
have-
wants stuff to be like, what would you call time? Well, like IndexedDB is a database for what's it,
Time
it's like
series?
time series, yes. And so maybe it's because it's like, okay, well, we're gonna over the second, we're going to add everything in, and then once that second is complete, then we can expose that on our Prometheus dashboard, or like Prometheus
Yeah.
endpoint sort of, and then throw it away after that or something like that.
Right. Now you have like per second, you not have a single point result point, but you have a vector because you have like one value for Windows, one for macOS, and we could also, for example, test like how many people are using Arch in general over their Apple iPhone and over their Raspberry Pi and whatever we will serve in the future, so to say.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is the small change you just saw above, where we touched a bit of metrics code, right? Metrics, increment, OS, arc. And as a workaround, where we only have the platform, we are not incrementing the arc for now. Which is like a limitation in metrics collection till we have a new Airshipper client. But I didn't want to interpret the string and do some string modification because like this is user data and it just more cause for problems to interpret it as don't interpreting it. Okay, and now we are jumping to our GitLab route, and this is now the filter which the route that is accessed by GitLab directly. So GitLab will do a post request, right, to Webhook and give some JSON payload. And here they have a secret, but we already checked the secret at this point, so we don't care for it any longer. And we have this payload JSON, and we have access to our metrics and database. And what we did before is we took our payload and tried to create those artifacts objects from it. And if those already existed, then we threw a warning, and then we processed all our artifacts. And then we did metrics, and then we returned. And now the process is a bit more complicated. So when we get to our pipeline, the first thing is we will process our early filter, which is checking for now only if the pipeline is actually successful, because we don't want to process any artifacts for in-progress pipelines or for pipelines that are cancelled, etc. After this is filled, after those are returned, right? After we have early return, we will actually check for variables and will extend our structure with the variable structure. Why variables? I will go over later. But for now, just keep in mind, like this needs to do REST call, but gives us access to variables. And then what we will do is we get a channel from our update. And if we have a channel, then we are happy. And then we do the same that we did before, right? We will generate our artifacts. Here, give off our artifacts with the channel provided. If there are no artifacts, then hey, request rejected. We don't have artifacts. And if we have artifacts, we will process and the webhook. I just moved this Tokyo spawn to this function it was before in this process function.
So you're spawning another thread to handle calling the webhook, or
this will be like processing will be like actually downloading the 1 gigabyte from GitLab, and we don't want to block the web server for this time.
So one thing I'm curious about, and maybe I just don't understand this full new workflow, but since we're trying to put stuff up onto GitHub, so basically the process that we're describing is something is built on, so we let's say it's Thursday, we've just built the most recent weekly build, and now that weekly build is finished, it sends a webhook to this server. And then this server receives it, it goes through what we're seeing right now, and then in the process step, it's going to download the artifacts from GitLab and then re-upload them to GitHub releases. Okay.
Of course, we could in the future just optimize this. It will download the artifacts, we have them locally, and will upload a copy to GitHub releases.
Why
And
do we want?
Of course, in the future,
yeah, why do we want them locally? But I think you'll be able to answer that.
this is just the current workflow. This is just the
Okay.
way that it works for the last 4 months, which is like buggy and which causes players to have slow download speeds, etc. I don't know if we want to have it, but this is the code that exists behind this function right now. And
Yeah, I'm thinking in the long run, it would be a good idea to have it locally and then have some test that could run every like 5 minutes or something, where it tries to download the file from GitHub servers. And if it gets like a 504 on some file, and so like the GitHub CDN is down or whatever, then it's, instead of redirecting people to the GitHub download, it's able to serve itself. And that would just make it more resilient against if there's some issue or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But that's just speculation.
So we can
have
like multiple storage backends, so to say, and then maybe just have the client giving when he wants to download it, just give us a number, a read by number from the client, right? And if it's retry number 1, we are trying to send it via GitHub. If it's retry number 2, we are maybe trying to serve it locally. Retry number 3, we, I don't know, try to have it from GitLab or whatever. And then we could like rotate there. Then we don't need to download it all the time, but have the client find out what works for him. Also, this would like work if GitHub is down in the region the client is working, right? If, for example, they have a local issue with their local, I don't know, European GitHub, but American GitHub is working fine, then we can still use GitHub in America.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing. Yeah, that's a good idea. Right. This is the
I'll make a comment on that just as an extra thing.
Yeah. Nice. Source main. Okay, going to the main function. This is just configuration stuff, right? Loading configuration file. This looks ugly as hell. We load a configuration file in our configuration path and panic. Could not open the config file. And if we have loaded it, we compile the config file. This is where we do all these calculations once, like creating the regex struct. We have our new routes listed here, and that's it. Metrics we went over. This is also just metrics code, incrementing a value, metrics code, getting rid of all those hard-coded values here. Gather, process. Here now we have the process stuff. This is the thing we just talked about, right? This downloading from GitHub and handling all of this.
Okay.
So, right, using URL directly. Request URL is the same as URL. And maybe have them again parallel the process functions here. So before we had like the number of artifacts and the database connection, and now we also have the channel information. Before we did the spawn in the first layer, we moved the spawn one layer up, so we can get rid of this async move. Receive duplicate artifact. Before we checked on the database, before we had this warning check here. Now I have to move all the way and everything is getting lost and completely complicated. Right. Before we had on each request we had this database check and checked the database if there is a duplicate key. But actually this was done before we answered our web call, and this is now moved into this Tokyo spawn part here. So we are a bit faster there, that we don't block for the database access on each webhook. only on the one that succeed. So we have it now here, because we want to have it outsourced and in the separate Tokyo thread, so to say. Debug information, which artifacts we have, and then we grab our channel. Channel must exist in it also will never fail, and if it fails, we throw an unreachable channel must exist in configuration at this point. And what we do is the same as we did before, right? We run through all our artifacts, and if there's an error, we will trace it. This code is just moved here, and also this pooling is just moved. So this instrument was moved a few layers up, so we have better metrics, not metrics, but tracing support. And also we just extended this information now with the channel we have. And right, request get artifact URL. We are getting the URL where we get the artifact from. Then we are downloading the artifact. For tracing support, I added the downloaded version here.
Just out of curiosity, on like line 67, like of so we have tracing error. What's the syntax where we have the question mark and then downloaded hash?
This syntax is like tracing error syntax, and it will like produce an error in a form of date warning, and then it will say like who was I don't know.
But why the question? Why the question mark? It seems like it's just putting those variables in.
Yeah, but if you use the question mark operator, it will annotate your variables with foo equals 2.2 and p equals 7.
Yeah.
And this is a standardized format, which p is not, of course, not 7. This is standardized format which then can be used by some post processors like Loki, and then we can filter for those values. And if we just
I really want to explore Loki. Loki looks pretty cool. Interesting.
Clear text, then we cannot filter for them in the future. Yeah. That's why I just moved them to the question mark format. And we should prefer those question mark format like everywhere in our code bases, even in Veloren coding. Mm-hmm. But we do actually almost everywhere. Right? Hashing does not match, hashes match, whatever. This code basically did not change. Yeah, this also did not change. It's just like the renaming part. And okay, we need now the RON crate, and we need the regex crate now. Okay. Any questions so far?
There's one section that you skipped over, and you said, we'll come back to this later. Okay. Yeah, so we'll take a look at that. I don't see any questions in chat. I think everything that I've just mentioned as we've come along, so I think we can take a look at that section.
Okay. Artifact handling. Let me find the documentation. GitLab Webhook API. Because I have to be sorry that this part. Okay. No, this is not what I need. Webhooks? No. Webhook events. Maybe this, right? Webhook event. But this is saying basically what Webhook's GitLab has, and what we are doing is a pipeline event. And we have like this pipeline, and we have all the information that you see right here, like in the real world example. and we are having variables. Oh, nice. Variables.
Clean.
And we are setting our variables here in our schedule. And like, here's our variable. And when we look at our real webhook that was triggered, then we see, nice, here are our variables. Here they're empty. They are empty. Why are they empty? They are empty because those are only pipeline variables, but these are schedule variables, and GitLab has no way to show our schedule variables in a pipeline. And this is sad.
Yeah.
Very, very sad. So we know that we run on a schedule. But what we actually don't know is the schedule we run on, right? We don't have any information in this request to the schedule that scheduled this pipeline, which is also sad. But for our pipeline, we have for our schedule, we have a info that has the last pipeline that got triggered. So what we can do is, when we have this webhook information, we can take this ID, go through the list of all schedules, look, what am I by accident the last pipeline, and if I am, then just take those pipelines variables and append them to my current variables. This is super hacky, but there is no other way from GitLab's API point, and that's why the code now is a bit complicated.
I see.
And so what we will do here now, let's move to this code is extend variable code. And this is completely new code that didn't exist before because we had no support for those variables. They just were empty all the time. And these are a few structs that are just locally defined because we don't need them anywhere else. And the first thing is we are getting our private token that we have now in the configuration file, which can be configured for our GitLab access. From GitLab, our GitLab auth token, which can be provided, will be added here because we need an auth token because those variables could theoretically be restricted or contain any sensible information, but for our Veloren use case, they don't do that. But that means we need authentication, and then we build a client, and we do a first web request to the schedules format. I cannot do this with curl right now because then I would show my auth token. But we basically get a JSON report that is giving us a list of all those schedules. But the list does not contain the variables yet. It does, I think, only contain the pipeline. Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, maybe there's some. So we have a list of all schedules. Once we have the list of all schedules, then we loop through all our schedules and have another REST call.
Get the information.
At the details, and then if we have the details, we are checking if the pipeline ID is equal. One thing I just noticed is it possible to get the pipeline information from the overview already, so that we don't need to schedule all? Is it possible to get pipeline ID from overview first request? So we don't need to get in a loop here. And this is just like the coding that is like grabbing the URL, inserting the project ID, which is hard-coded for now.
Well, is it hard-coded? Oh yeah, it is.
It's hard-coded actually. I did not change it in. We could put it into the configuration of also, but for this merge request, I just didn't change it because I don't have any interest for now. But if anyone wants to change it, feel free to open a merge request, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And here we have to do this one request and then request in a loop to get the information, and then if we have a matching, then we take our variables and append also the pipeline the scheduled variables to our pipeline variables. In the long term, I think there are a few GitLab issues open that say, hey, we extend our Webhook API a bit, give us more information. But the experience I made is, I think there are so many open, I think 30,000 open issues on GitLab that you cannot just hope that they will implement it by accident. Because it will take years.
Yes.
Workaround time it is.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to have this be done, you can just skip. You can just, I think, skip providing a token, right? If you don't provide a token in your configuration, then it will just ignore all those variables, all those steps, with the cost, of course, that you can no longer filter on variables, which you then have to do in your configuration, of course. You have to be careful then.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the magic with variables, and that's at least all the code I have to show for now. And hopefully,
yeah, perfect. I think this is pretty cool. So, we've left some comments, and so I think once those are resolved, then I'm happy to approve this. It looks like it. It looks like it does everything correctly and nicely and stuff like that. So that is good. I don't think I have any more questions from chat or anything like that. But I do want to mention, someone in chat mentioned it's nice to join the stream and hear another German fellow speaking. So very
sorry
cool.
for my accent.
Ich spreche auf gut Deutsch. That's the best I can do. Sorry for my accent. There we go. All right. Yeah. So this was pretty cool. I like going through this, and I think I want to try this again with some of the other MRs that we have open, and maybe even like have like a speed run of like have like a few devs on here, and then we're like, okay, well, what are some like small ones that we have to go and review, and we just do like each one in like just a few minutes, where we don't have like the original author come on, but we just come in, comment and stuff.
Yeah, but I also like this when an author comes on and explain it, because there are many MRs open actually where I am not confident in knowing what's going on all the time. And
I agree. I think some of the big ones, exactly. Like,
and just I would need to wait for another person to also take care of Airshipper before he has the knowledge even to review this, and then we don't have the quick profits from this, right? Because
we want
to have, of course, improved our experience there.
Yeah, a lot of today, like we had our meeting before this, and I was considering like there's a lot that if the bot has a little bit more tooling, and so for example, you can open drafts from our different repositories, not just our main repository, and if it could have some way of handling issues better, so like telling you like when there's stale issues and when there's issues that haven't been touched, then a small amount of tooling will go a long way into making it easier for more people to get involved with the code review process. And so I think for myself, since I like the amount of Rust that I know it feels like it's not all the way up there as some of the other core developers, then like sometimes for myself I find it difficult to go and do code reviews and feel like my input is valid. But then in doing this, like, and talking about it, like I love thinking through this type of stuff and seeing the architecture and hearing from people in chat and stuff. And so I think we found a decent amount of stuff here that was like good to cover, and so
totally.
It will be awesome to give this a try with someone else. And also, like, as long as I don't have to prepare this ahead of time, Like as long as I don't have to advertise it and like pick a time too much, as long as I can just sit down with someone, then I'm always happy to do something like this. So yes, thank you for taking the time today, XMAC.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I mean, I will
Oh,
profit.
good.
I will get a review.
Yes, exactly.
Also,
We make the reviews happen.
Thanks for everyone in
Awesome.
chat who is listening and interested in code reviewing Veloren.
Yes. Just checking if there's any other good comments here. Yes, Michael mentioning, yes, a good idea to get more people involved doing this kind of stuff. Yes, I know almost nothing about Rust, so it's nice to see what it looks like in action. I think that's a big one for a lot of people, is the ability to have people talk through code. Like I watch a lot of like John Ho's videos, and he does like a lot of educational Rust videos, and I get very lost in some of the deeper parts. And so I like the first half an hour, and then I need like to learn some stuff to catch up with some of the later stuff. But I think this format is kind of cool because it might not require full knowledge of how stuff is going, and rather me as like a laid person for a lot of topics can come in and say, okay, well, if I understand it correctly, this is what is happening, and then sort of walk through that, and then that can be beneficial. So that's pretty cool. A question in chat: does Veloren use a game library like Bevy or similar? No. So Veloren is pretty much like vanilla Rust, and so we use like WGPU for graphics, and we have like a lot of different crates that are for like networking and for just GUI and a lot of stuff. But we do not have a game framework that we're sitting on top of, so it's just pure Rust. I mean, not that. I mean, like if you're using Bevy, it's more like there's like you're using abstractions on ideas that Bevy provides, and we're still using entity component system as well, but it's more bare bones. We're putting the glue together, whereas Bevy brings the glue. All right. Any last words you want, Texmac?
Yeah, sorry. No, I don't want to get into this whole discussion. But
yeah.
Maybe we have some infos on this also in the FAQ or in Discord.
In the book. It must be in the book somewhere. I don't know. I haven't gone through the book in a minute. All right, good stuff. So we'll end it off here. Maybe if I have energy, we'll do this again next Sunday. Take a look through some stuff. And so we'll see you then.